So first we'll start with SQL, PLSQL basics, data warehouse, Informatica Power Center, unit testing, deployment, and Unix basics, shell scripting. Finally, we are going to end with projects. So this is the training agenda. Okay. So if you want to learn Informatica tool, you should have knowledge in all these areas. So whatever the knowledge is required to work in Informatica, we are going to discuss each and everything. So with this training, you can work, or you can join as up to max 7 years of experience. You can easily work as a 7 years experience guy. Okay. So first, in this demo session, I will give overview about what is data warehouse, what type of data we store in data, and what we can do by using data. Then we'll discuss about what is this Informatica, what we can do by using this Informatica tool, what is the use of Informatica tool in data warehouse, and how to use the tool. Discuss about these things briefly, and also we'll discuss also very briefly. First, let's start with data warehouse. This is an ATM machine. Okay, and this ATM machine is connected to this database. This is database. Okay, so ATM machine is connected to this database. Whatever the transactions made by the user, all the transactions are going to be inserted into this database. So whatever the transactions made by the user, all the transaction details are going to be inserted in this database. Today morning, user made first a transaction. Transaction means withdrawing or depositing the money, right? So user made the first transaction. Whatever the transaction made by the user, the same transaction details inserted in the database, right? After 1 hour, he made second transaction. The same second transaction details also there in this database. After 1 hour, he made third transaction. The same third transaction details also going to be loaded in this database. Like this, user made total 50 transactions for the day. So if the user made 50 transactions, all the 50 transaction details should be there in this database, right? So user made total 50 transactions for the day through that ATM machine, and we have all the 50 transactions in the database. Okay. End of the day, he selected mini statement option. So in ATM machine, we have option, right? Mini statement. So as soon as user selects the mini statement option, so it is going to generate the mini statement, right? So how many transaction details will have that mini statement? Do you have any idea? User made 50 transaction. So now mini statement contains how many transactions?
Maybe 10.
10. Okay, so assume 10 transactions. So even the user made 50 transactions, this mini statement shows only last 10 transactions, last 5 or last 10 transactions. Why it displays only last 10 transactions? Why not all the transaction details? Means one of the reason, whatever the database which is connected from ATM machine, this database is designed to maintain limited number of transactions for that user or any user. Whatever the database connected from ATM machine, that database is designed to maintain limited number of transactions, not all the transactions. What will happen if you maintain all the transactions? Suppose this user made 1 million transactions from last 1 year. If he has made 1 million transactions, today this database also should have all 1 million transactions, right? Now for one user, we have 1 million transaction details in this database. Today he selected balance inquiry option. We also have balance inquiry option in ATM machine. So he selected balance inquiry option. As soon as user selects the balance inquiry option, it will connect to the database, and in this database for that user, now we have 1 million records. Assume a select query is going to execute to display the result or to display the balance on top of 1 million records, because for that user we have 1 million records in the database. He selected balance inquiry option. As soon as user selects any option in ATM machine, it will connect to the database. There it is going to execute some select query to display the result. Now for that user, we have 1 million records. Assume query is going to execute on top of 1 million records. So how much select query is going to take to execute on top of 1 million records? Is it going to take time or not? Yes, right. So definitely it will take time. How much time it is going to take? Assume 5 minutes. Okay. So we have 1 million records. On top of 1 million records, to execute a select query, it is taking 5 minutes time. So user selected balance inquiry option. Now it is taking 5 minutes time to display the result. Can we wait in ATM machine for 5 minutes to see the balance? No, right? As soon as we select the option, immediately it should have to display the result. But here it is taking time to display the result. Why it is taking time? Because of huge records for that user. Because of 1 million records, query is taking long time to execute. So that is the reason it is taking a lot of time to display the result. So that is the reason whatever the database is connected from ATM machine, all those databases designed to maintain limited number of transactions. Limited means last 10 or last 20 transactions only. Suppose let's say last 10. As soon as user made the 11th transaction, first record is going to be deleted from this database. As soon as user made the 12th transaction, before going to insert the 12th record into this database, second record is going to be deleted. As soon as user made 13th transaction, before it is going to insert the 13th record into the database, third record is going to be deleted and 13th record is going to be inserted in this database. Like this database is designed. So now we are sure that whatever the database is connected from ATM machine, that database will have limited number of transactions. What will happen if you maintain huge transaction or all the transaction details? Definitely it is going to affect to the customer. So that is the reason. So this database is designed to maintain limited number of transactions, or we can say latest data or current data or last 10 transactions or last 20 transactions. So now even though user made 1 million transactions, today how many records will be there in this database?
Last 10.
Last 10. So suppose let's say we have only last 10 records, and in those last 10 only we have all the user account details. Today if user selects the balance inquiry option also, query is going to execute on top of 1 million or 10 records?
10 records.
10 records only, right? How much time select query is going to execute to on top of 10 records?
Very
Seconds,
few.
right?
Very
Fraction of seconds. Okay, so as soon as user selects the option, immediately it is going to display the result. So now why it is displaying immediately within fraction of seconds? Because we have less number of records. So that is the reason we maintain only less number of records in this database. Okay, now we are sure that whatever the database connected from ATM machine, that contains a limited number of transactions. Okay, fine. Next, user requested for last 1 month transaction details or last 1 year transaction details. Okay, or last 2 years transaction details. Do we have last 1 year transaction details in this database?
No.
No, right? We do not have. Then from where we will get? So for that, in real time, we will be having another database. So whatever the transactions made by the user, first transaction data or first record, it is going to be inserted into the first database. The same first record also going to be inserted into the second database. As soon as user made the second transaction details, first it is going to be inserted into the first database. The same second transaction detail also going to be inserted into the second database. As soon as user made the third transaction details, first it is going to be inserted into the first database. The same third transaction details also going to be inserted into the second database. Like this, As soon as user made the 11th transaction, from the first, before going to insert the 11th record, first record it is going to be deleted and 11th record it is going to be inserted. Whereas in the second database, we are not going to delete anything. Directly we are inserting that 11th record from first database to second database. Like this, as soon as the transaction, first, as soon as user made the 12th transaction, from the first database, second record is going to be deleted and then 12th record is going to be inserted. The same 12th record again, we have to insert into the second database like this. So whatever the transactions made by the user, all the transaction details from day 1 to till date, all 1 million transaction details we have in the second database. So first database contains latest data or current data, whereas second database contains from day 1 to till date, we have all the transaction details. So now whatever the data here we have in the second database from day 1 to till date, this data can we call as a historical data or not? So what we can call this data? Can we call this as historical data?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can call this as a historical data. Historical data means from day 1 to till date, if you have all the transaction details, then that data we can call it as a historical data. Okay, so now whichever the database is having the historical data, this database we call it as a data warehouse. Right? So data warehouse contains what type of data?
Historical.
Historical data.
Historical data. So data warehouse contains historical data. What about the first database? Can we call this as a data warehouse?
No.
No. So here we do not have history. Here we have latest data or current data. So whichever the database is having the latest data or current data, so this database we call it as a OLTP database, online transaction process. So OLTP database contains the latest data or current data, whereas data warehouse contains historical data. Fine. So now we are clear with what is data warehouse and what type of data we store in data warehouse. So data warehouse contains historical data. Right. Next. What we can do by using this historical data? Any idea? What is the use of storing the data? What is the use of storing the historical data in data warehouse? What we can do by
You
using
can
this
use it for
historical
analysis.
analysis? Okay. Okay, fine. So analysis, we'll see what is the use of this storing, what is the use of storing the historical data in data warehouse. We have another ATM machine in different location, one more ATM machine in another location. This ATM machine is in US location, and this ATM machine is in India location, and this machine is in UK location. Like this, we have 3 ATM machines belongs to same bank in 3 different locations. Now, all these 3 ATM machines, first they have connected to OLTP database, and then from OLTP to data warehouse. I repeat, we have 3 ATM machines belongs to same bank in 3 different locations. Okay, and all these 3 are connected to OLTP database first, and then from OLTP to data warehouse. So that means in data warehouse, now we have history of all these 3 ATM machines, right? In data warehouse, now we have history of all these 3 ATM machines.
Yes.
Okay, now we have history like this. For example, in the year of 2001, from this location, from US location machine, we have around 120 transactions. Whole year, that is in the year of 2001, from US location machine, total how many transactions are there? 120 transactions. From India location, we have 100. From UK location, we have around 40. Like this, we have whole year transaction details are there in data warehouse belongs to these 3 ATM machines. Okay, in the same way, in the next year, in the year of 2002, from this location we have 100 transactions, from this location we have 130 transactions, from this location we have 30 transactions. In the same way, in the next year, that is in the year of 2003, from this location we have around 90 transactions, from this location we have around 80 transactions, from this location we have around 40 transactions. Like this, we have 3 years of transaction details in data, we have 3 years of transaction details belongs to these 3 ATM machines we have in data warehouse. Since all these 3 ATM machines are belongs to same bank, they have some cutoff transactions. If the transactions are going greater than 50, then that center is in profits. If the transactions are less than 50, then that center is in loss. Like this, they have some cutoff transactions. Okay, if the transactions are greater than 50, then that center is in profits. If the transactions are less than 50, that center is in running in loss. Like this, they have some cutoff transactions. Okay, now by seeing this data, you tell me in the next year which machine we should have to keep and which machine we should have to remove to keep the business in profits.
US and India.
Yeah, US and India machine we should have to keep, and UK one we should have to remove because UK transactions are going less than 50, right? Okay, so UK transactions are going less than 50, so that's why we should have to remove UK location machine. So what you are doing here, you have analyzed whatever the data here we have, you have analyzed this data. Based on your analysis, you are taking the decision, right, which should keep and which should not keep to keep the business in profits, right? So whatever the data here we have to do analysis, so this can we call as a report?
Yeah.
We can call this as a report. So from where we have generated this report, how we have generated this report?
From data warehouse.
From data warehouse data, we have generated a report. What is the use of report? Analysis and
For the analysis.
decision making.
Decision making.
Yeah. So for analysis and decision making, we need to have these type of reports. If you don't have these type of reports, how you are going to take the decision? How would you know which center is in profits and which center is in loss? So if you don't have data warehouse, is it possible to generate a report on OLTP database data? Is it possible to generate a report on OLTP data?
No.
No.
No, right? So to generate a report, we need to have what type of data? Historical data. So, but OLTP doesn't have history. If you don't have data warehouse, then how you are going to generate a report? If you don't have reports, how you are going to do the analysis on the business, and how would you know which center is in profit and which center is in loss? It's very difficult. So that is the reason we need to have data warehouse. So data warehouse, purely it is for reporting purpose. Analysis, reporting, decision making. Got it? So that is the overview of data warehouse. Clear?
Yes.
Okay, next, coming to Informatica. Informatica is an ETL tool, right? What is meant by ETL? Have you ever heard about this ETL? What is meant by ETL?
Extract, transfer, and load.
Extracting the data from OLTP, transform and load into data warehouse. Extract, transform and load. That is called ETL. ETL means extract, transform and load. Extracting the data from OLTP database, that is selecting the data from OLTP database, transform and load or insert into the data warehouse. Whatever the transactions made by the user through the ATM machine, first those transaction details are going to be inserted in OLTP database, right? The same record we also have to insert into the data warehouse. Who will insert? Whose responsibility to insert the record from OLTP to data warehouse? It's ETL, Informatica. So with the help of Informatica tool, we select the data, whatever the transactions are going to be inserted in OLTP database, we select the data from OLTP database and we transform, insert into the data warehouse. In data warehouse, with the help of that Informatica tool, we keep the history. So once we loaded the data into the data warehouse, then there would be a separate team called reporting team. So they are going to generate data, they are going to generate the reports based on. So we are Informatica developers, we create Informatica mappings between OLTP and data warehouse to select the data, transform and load into data warehouse. That is the use of Informatica tool. Okay, so Informatica is the company name. So that company developed many tools. One of the tool name is ETL Informatica Power Center. So this tool is used to extract the data, that is to select the data from one database, transform and load into another database. Not only from OLTP to data warehouse, we can select the data from any type of source database like Oracle database, Sybase database, DB2, mainframe, SAP, flat files, XML, right? Salesforce, like any type of source data. With the help of this tool, we can fetch the data from any type of source data, and also we can load that is into the target database. It's not that only Oracle database. We can load the data into any type of target database. So while loading the data from source database to target database, that is from OLTP to data warehouse, we have n number of scenarios. Different scenarios are there. For example, let's say in OLTP database we have a table like this. Employee table, employee number, employee name and salary. We have a table, and in this table we have data like this. Okay, so we have total 5 records in employee table, and if you observe, last 2 are the duplicate records. Someone mistakenly inserted duplicate records, or because of some services failure or some other issues, we are not sure. So some duplicate records got inserted in OLTP employee table. We have used Informatica tool to load those OLTP data into the data warehouse. If our tool is going to select all these 5 records, and if it is going to load all the 5 records into the data warehouse, now data warehouse will have duplicate records, which is invalid data. If you have invalid data in data warehouse, what type of reports they are going to generate? Is it going to be a valid or invalid reports?
Invalid reports.
Definitely invalid, right? So definitely it would be invalid reports. So that's why we should have to load valid data. So how to load valid data? So in Informatica tool, so we know that here we have duplicate records and we want to select only distinct records. So to select the distinct records in Informatica tool, we have an option selected distinct. There is a checkbox in the tool. So if you enable that checkbox, that tool will read only distinct records. It will ignore the duplicate records. This is not like a programming language like Java, C, C++ or .NET, not like that. This is a tool, so everything can be done by options. So you should have to know based on your requirement what option we have to set here. So like here, to select the distinct records, we have selected distinct checkbox. You should have to know where is that checkbox, how to use that option, and in which scenario you have to use that option. So like that we have many scenarios, many options are there. So we'll be discussing all those options and scenarios in Informatica class. And also sometimes, you know, like here we have the 5 records. As per the requirement, our business says I want to load the records where salary greater than 100. So I don't want to bother about the duplicate records. I want to load the records where salary greater than 100. So then we have SQL query, right? Select a star from employee where salary greater than 100. So like this we have SQL query. So this SQL query, what it will do? It will return the records where salary greater than 100, right? Okay, so in Informatica tool we also have option to write SQL queries. In Informatica we also have option to write SQL queries. So if you are not going to write SQL query, then it will select all the records. The tool will select all the records. If you write SQL query in Informatica tool, first it is going to execute that SQL query, whatever you have written in that tool, and whatever the records written by that SQL query, it will process only those records. So that is the reason you should have some basic knowledge of SQL. Sometimes a business says I don't want to load all the records. I want to load these specific records, right? So based on that, you have to write some basic SQL, simple, not complex SQL query, some basic SQL queries you have to write, and whatever the records written by that SQL query, it will load only those records into the target database. So that is the reason you should have some basic knowledge of SQL, and whatever the knowledge is required for Informatica, we are going to discuss that SQL in our SQL in our SQL session. right? So from start, that's the reason first we are going to start with SQL. So from SQL we are going to discuss like 5 types of languages: DDL, DML, DRL, TCL, DCL. Like this, we have 5 types of languages. In each and every type of language we have different set of commands. So first we are going to start with that. Then SQL functions, SQL operators, SQL constraints, SQL joins, SQL views, materialized views, some important queries, and SQL query tuning. So these things we'll be discussing from SQL class. Then coming to PLSQL, in PLSQL we have like cursors, packages, triggers, functions, right? So stored procedures, all these things we have. But for Informatica developer, you should have knowledge on only stored procedure, because we create stored procedure in Informatica. So why means, as I told you, like in Informatica tool, we have an option to write SQL query. You can write one query. If you have a requirement to write more than one query, multiple queries you have to write. So then you, instead of writing multiple SQL queries in Informatica tool, what we do is we create one stored procedure in a database. Inside that stored procedure, we write multiple SQL queries, and we call that stored procedure in Informatica to execute that stored procedure. So that is the reason you should have some basic knowledge of SQL stored, PLSQL stored procedure, not other things. Okay, so you are not PLSQL developer, so you are Informatica developer, so that is the reason you should have basic knowledge of SQL and PLSQL. Next, coming to data warehouse, here now I have given the overview about data warehouse. Once we start data warehouse class, in between OLTP and data warehouse, we have 2 more databases like ODS database and stage database. So while loading the data from OLTP to data warehouse, first we load the data from OLTP to ODS, and then ODS to stage, and stage to data warehouse. This is the data flow. So in data warehouse class, we are going to discuss in detail what is ODS database, what is stage database, why we have to load the data from OLTP to ODS, then ODS to stage, and stage to data warehouse. Okay, and then we have 2 types of schemas like star schema, snowflake schema. What is star schema? What is snowflake schema? And how it is designed. Okay, and also in data warehouse we have dimensions and facts. Okay, so we are going to see what type of dimensions are there and what type of facts are there, what is dimension, what is fact. Okay, so these things we'll be discussing in data warehouse class. Then coming to Informatica, now I have given overview what is Informatica tool and what is the use of Informatica tool and where we use this Informatica tool in data warehouse. Once we start Informatica class, in Informatica we have around 35 transformations. Transformation is nothing but business logic. While loading the data from source to target database, we should have to implement any one of the transformation. Okay, so even though we have 35 transformations, in real time we use max of 15 transformations. But in our training, we are going to discuss each and every transformation functionality, and parallelly we are going to implement those transformations in real-time scenarios. So whatever the mappings we create in real time, the same scenarios we will be discussing in our training. Whereas in real time, we'll be having millions of records, but the same mapping, same transformation, same logic will be executing on less number of rows, right? And also not only relational tables, we are also going to discuss how we can load the data from flat file to a table. Okay, multiple flat files to a table, XML to a table, or table to a multiple flat file, or table to a XML file, or table to a flat file. Okay, so these things also will be Informatica, right? Next, coming to unit testing. As an Informatica developer, not only Informatica developer, any developer, they should have to perform the unit test cases on development environment. And like we have max 10 standard test cases. So we'll be discussing those max 10 standard test cases on our mappings, Informatica mappings, whatever we create. Okay, so those 10 test cases we will be discussing in unit testing class. Coming to deployment. Deployment, I think you know about deployment. Deployment is nothing but like moving the code from one database to another database. Like in real time, we will be having like dev database, QA database, UAT, and production database, right? Not only in Informatica, in any technology, you will be having these databases. Any developer, they should have to develop the code in dev environment, right? The same way here in Informatica also, we should have to develop the Informatica mappings in dev. If it is working fine as expected, then we have to move it to QA. So here QA team, that is testing team, ETL testers will be the testing team. They are going to test developers, Informatica developers mappings, and they will be having their own test cases. They are going to perform the unit test cases on our mappings. So if it is working fine, if all the test cases passed, then yes, then QA will send sign off to move those mappings from QA to UAT, right? So in UAT means user acceptance test. So here client side technical team is going to validate our mappings. If it is working fine there also, then client says yes, it is working fine as expected, please move it to production. That means live environment. So finally we are going to move all our mappings to the live environment. Okay, so moving the mappings from one environment, that is dev to QA or QA to UAT or UAT to prod, is called deployment. So for this there would be separate team called deployment team. Even though there is a team in some companies, deployment team will not be there, so then developer has to take care. And even though deployment team is there, so there are some roles and responsibilities for developer in deployment. So we'll be discussing those deployment activities in deployment class, and also we'll see how we can move our mappings from dev to QA or QA to UAT, UAT to prod. So these things we'll be discussing from deployment. Coming to Unix, like in real time, Informatica server would be installed in Unix machine, whereas Informatica client would be installed in Windows machine. So sometimes, not sometimes, most of the times Informatica developer has to interact with the server to upload the files from Windows system to Unix machine, or to download the files, or to copy the files from one location to another location, or to set the file permissions. Okay, so these things we'll be doing in real time. So for that you should have some basic Unix knowledge, like how to create a directory, how we can upload the files from Windows to local system to server system, how we can move the files from one location to another location, how to copy the file, how to search for a file, how to search for a specific string, how to set a file permission. So like this, some basic Unix commands are there. So we'll be discussing some basic Unix commands, and also shell scripting. Most experienced people will write shell scripting. Okay, and in Informatica training we'll be discussing 5 standard scenarios where we use Unix shell script. Okay, most of the times we'll be using those Unix shell script, and I will be sharing those 5 Unix shell scripts to you, and in Unix class we'll walk through those 5 Unix shell scripts. Okay, so then finally coming to projects. So in projects I'm going to explain 2 domain projects, like one is manufacturing domain project, the other one is pharma domain project. Okay, so first I'll explain the business of those projects and your roles and responsibilities. So how you are going to get the work, from where you have to start, and what type of mappings you have to create, and okay, so and what other deliverables you have to prepare in that project. So all these things we'll be discussing in projects class. Fine, so with that we are going to finish our training. So this training duration is 30 working days, and it is daily 2-hour session. The timings: 6 AM to 8 AM IST. Okay, so CST time 6:30 PM to 8:30 PM CST. So CST Monday to Saturday. Installing all these softwares in your system, and also I have Sigwin software to practice Unix. Okay, and also I will share the materials, so you can go through those materials also. Fine, any questions? That's all from my end. If you have any questions, you can ask me now.